Wife comes home.
Some may find the following disturbing. Discretion is advised.
The Bears.
Because of the way they play the nickel corner here, and the nickel corner plays 88, 85% of the snaps. He's got to be like part linebacker.
The Bears.
When you're in the scouting room, there's going to be differences of opinion.
The Bears.
Once coaches get involved, of course, they've got their own opinions about what fits best for what they want to do, and that could be drastically different than what the scouts say.
Well, you're looking at traits. And remember when he tested very, very well.
The Bears.
One thing good about Kevin, he's been with two other organizations, as well as being the commissioner of the Big Ten. He's been around.
The Bears.
With Greg Olson, Jerry didn't want to get rid of him. I didn't want to get rid of him. Nobody wanted to get rid of him. One guy wanted to get rid of him. Mike Martz, because Mike Martz didn't know what the hell to do with him. We tried to talk Lovey out of hiring Mike Martz for a month and a half. He's playing zone, but number one, he doesn't get enough depth with the drop. But
Right.
who the hell's going? How many times does a 305, 310-pound defensive tackle drop into coverage, especially in a key situation?
The Bears.
Greg, why are teams wrong on quarterback evaluation so often?
Number one, it's a hard position to evaluate. There's probably not as many real good quarterback evaluators as there needs to be.
The Bears. The Bears. The Bears.
Welcome, everyone, to a fresh edition of GTF, Gabriel Talks Football. My name is Aldo Gandia. As for our schedule for this week, it's a little bit up in the air. Of course, with this being New Year's Eve, we've got this special 2 p.m. edition of GTF, and then the rest of the week, we're going to kind of play it by ear. And so the best way to stay on top of stuff is to subscribe to our YouTube channel or our audio podcast, or follow Greg or myself on the X machine. Speaking of Greg, let's see if he's around. There he is. Greg Gabriel, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing wonderful. How are you? Happy New Year.
Happy
Or
New
almost
Year to
Happy
you.
New Year, whatever. Happy end of year.
Will you be celebrating tonight, or will you be fast asleep by 9 o'clock?
Well, I'm going out just shortly after we get done with this. A good friend of ours, their son is playing at this restaurant in a little town on a lake, a little west of here. So we're going to be going there. But yeah, trust me, I'll be in early. I stay up till midnight for New Year's days are long behind me.
Yeah, same here. I will, I actually thought about maybe going on the air around 11 o'clock and doing kind of a New Year's thing with probably 2 or 3 people watching. But that only depends on how I feel.
5 or 6. I mean, what
That's that's right. The more the merrier. 5 or 6 is fine. So, Greg, we're going to talk about primarily 3 things. And that is the head coaching position, whether the Chicago Bears might be entertaining the idea of moving on from General Manager Ryan Post. And thirdly, all of the bullshit that we've been reading on social media. There's this guy named Sears Tower where people
he deleted his account.
Oh, okay. So people have anointed him as the true insider of the
Yeah,
Bears.
well, yeah. And last year he was around and then all of a sudden deleted his account. He gets you figure that dude out in a minute. He claims he worked in the NFL front office and he lives here. But there's only one problem with that. The fraternity of people who worked in an NFL front office is very, very small.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I know them all. And there ain't any that live here.
Wow. Well, Brandon is telling us that he's back on X, this Sears Tower guy. So
when did he come back? Today?
It had to be today because I checked last night and he was gone.
He deleted his account yesterday, and then everybody, a lot of people laughed at him. And then he'll come back. He's, somebody who's looking for clicks and whatever. He's full. He doesn't know a thing. He's full of shit, and I'd tell him right to his face. So I mean, you know, anybody who wants to believe a word he says deserves to get beaten by the guy.
Absolutely. I mean,
Okay,
he does the old fortune telling trick. You know, this could be wrong, but I believe that this is happening.
Yeah.
Sources tell me now they could change their mind. He's covering his ass with everything he posts.
Of course, and anything he puts has already been out there if you search hard enough. You know, it's like, remember we had Brandon Jacobs. He disappeared into the night. You know, we get these guys. We had the guy that said, who was the former Eagles #1 pick? The Bears were going to trade for him. It was a lock. It's going to be tomorrow. It never happened.
Never happened. That's right. And then when they do, you know, guess something right, and I'm talking in general, like this particular person nailed one thing. Oh, it was Cousins going to the Falcons, I think. Everybody thinks, well, this guy knows his stuff. He predicted the Cousins going to Atlanta or whatever it was. Or no, it was
Well, that
Darnold.
was really hard to figure it out.
Yeah, it was Darnold going to the Falcons. That's what
Darnold going to the Falcons?
Sam Darnold going. No, I'm sorry. Sam Darnold going to the Vikings. That's what he predicted, and he's hung his hat on that. And a lot of people think he's legit because of that one prediction. It's just not the way it works.
No,
it's not the way it works.
Listen to Pelissero, Rappaport, Jay Glazer, Schefter, couple others. If it's anybody else, they're sitting in mama's basement throwing shit out. Okay.
I love it.
You know, it's some of the stuff that people put out. You know, there's this one that people are swearing by now, that Ben Johnson won't want to come to Chicago unless he brings his own GM. So what are the Bears going to do if he demands his own GM? Can I use my voice I used a few minutes ago? I want my own GM. Yeah, let's see. He's got 3 years of an offensive coordinator experience. Very good, of course. No question. Might be one of the best in the game. He's got nothing else to hang his hat on to make a demand. You know who makes a demand and gets his own GM?
Who?
Bill Belichick, who was his own GM.
Yeah.
Andy Reid, who you know has the only guy who's won been to more Super Bowls is Belichick. That's it. Not a rookie.
Yeah, I just don't understand where people come up with this stuff. And but the biggest thing to me,
this one gets me going. So then somebody says, "Well, 49ers." That's not the way it happened. And somebody said Harbaugh and the Chargers. Not the way it happened. Now, if you look at the Harbaugh situation with the 49ers, or rather with the Chargers fired everybody. The owner made the hire. And you know that shit was going on before. You know, while he was still at Michigan and had been talked about during the year. Tom Telesco was the GM. They had no GM. Okay, so Harbaugh wanted somebody in there that he could trust. Who did he go to? His brother. Okay, and where did Joe Ortiz come from? Baltimore. Worked for his brother. Okay, it's an entirely different situation because he knew Joe through his brother, and his brother said, Joe will do a good job for her, yada, yada, yada. Okay, the San Francisco thing with Lynch. Lynch is royalty in San Francisco. Freaking Hall of Fame safety for the 49ers.
Yeah.
Okay, another situation where the front office was fired because they had some problems going on there. And the owner was involved. It was more like a package deal. It wasn't that Shanahan picked Lynch. The ownership picked Lynch, and married him with Shanahan, and it's worked really well. And Shanahan had been in the league. His dad was a head coach. He'd been a successful offensive coordinator at 2 franchises, taken one to a Super Bowl. You know, he had a lot of skins on the wall. I'm not saying Johnson's not good. Johnson is excellent. But I'm going to keep going back to what I've been saying for weeks now. Who can guarantee that he's the right guy?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Well,
and now we don't know the answer to that. And then there's people saying, well, here's what's going on in Hallis Hall. Warren wants a leader of men, and Poles wants an offensive guy. Now, what have we seen at Hallis Hall since Poles has been there? Besides, the doors have been locked tighter than Langley, the CIA Langley business building. Nothing gets out.
That is true. That is true. And which is a great thing. They've locked things down. There was a problem with stuff being leaked out, or at least players felt like they were entitled to leak stuff out when they really shouldn't. That was a problem for the Bears. Hopefully those days are over with. What do you think now about all these stories about Poles has gotten an extension? It seems like someone just put that out there to aggravate people, because right now Poles is such a divisive figure in Chicago.
Okay. My personal opinion is he stays. And we talked about it before. And the reason being is it made no sense. If you were going to fire him, it made no sense to keep him 1 second longer than you kept Flus. It was like you basically set yourself behind by keeping him this extra 4 weeks. Because not only do you have to start a coaching search, and you could begin they could theoretically interview Vrabel today, being that he came out of contract with the Browns yesterday. So you're setting yourself back from doing that, because now you have to go out and you got to do a full search for a GM. Somebody says, well, they can elevate Cunningham. No, they cannot. That's not allowed by league rules. You've got to do a full search. And as far as, and I hate bringing up the minority thing, but unfortunately, because of the Rooney Rule, it's there. It's a bullshit rule. But you can't. Ian Cunningham would not count as a Rooney Rule interview because he's in-house. It's the same thing with Thomas Brown. Thomas Brown will get interviewed for the head coaching job, but he does not count as a Rooney Rule interview because he's an in-house candidate. They got to be two out of the building candidates for both the general manager job and the head coaching job. So there's a lot of things that have to go on. It takes time. And in the coach search, they're putting themselves 2 to 3 weeks behind the other people that are involved. The Jets, for instance, they hired a search firm, which is a couple former GMs and Tannenbaum and Spielman, to do the search. They've already interviewed 3 head coaching candidates and a bunch of GM candidates.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you're just constantly putting yourself behind if you in fact were going to do that. Could they? Of course they could do it. I just don't. It makes no sense to me that they would have already done it and been on that search. Ryan Poles has done most of the work he's done for the last 4 weeks since the day Flus has been let go, is do nothing but research on potential coaches. Mm-hmm. Make calls, find out the strengths, find out the weaknesses, call people who have worked with them, these guys, and find out what they can find out about each individual. Maybe they've even talked to players, probably did. Talk to former players that have been with these guys. Tell me about them. What do you like? What don't you like? People just think it's, well, he's the best candidate. We're going to hire him. There is so much more to it than that.
Mm-hmm.
And I say it from experience. I've been involved twice in coaching searches. Once very directly, the other time indirectly.
Fascinating stuff, Greg. Jay Sanders wants to know, why do you think the Rooney Rule is bullshit? Can you please explain?
I think it's almost racist. Mm-hmm. You should be interviewed on. There's a lot of candidates out there that happen to be minorities.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you should be interviewed on your merit, not your race.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, there's a lot of quality. Ron Rivera counts as a minority interview,
right?
Because he's Hispanic. Okay, but just the whole thing. Ron Rivera's a hell of a coach. Who cares what he is?
Here's the thing, though, Greg. Let me push back a little bit. As you well know, there was a time where there were no African American coaches, no African American quarterbacks, no African American centers, no African American middle linebackers, because those were thought as the thinking positions. And so we needed to install something that was going to put African Americans in front of NFL owners.
Totally agree. Okay. That's 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Let's take Chicago Bears as a perfect example. You got an African-American president, an African-American general manager, an African-American assistant general manager, and an African-American head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And the trainer is African-American, and the equipment manager is African-American. I mean, you can go through the whole organization. It's as diverse as you can find.
Right.
Okay, and a lot of the organizations are. Look at how many African American general managers there are in the National Football League. There is a ton. There's a lot because they deserve to be. They're very good. They work their way up.
So the Rooney Rule has worked, and maybe it's time to relax it or to do away with it. Is that fair to say?
Here's what I think is wrong with it. Because it sends the wrong message. And okay, let's say Ian Cunningham gets interviewed for a job and they hire him, and the Bears get 2 third-round draft picks because of that. That's the part that's wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Why are you hiring him? And it doesn't cost the team that gets them. They get like bonus picks, compensatory picks, and it sends the wrong message.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Bears currently have misused the Rooney Rule in any way because of the strong African American minority presence at Hallis Hall? Do you think they've perhaps gone the other way and hired people who weren't ready?
No, I can't say that.
Okay.
Ryan Poles was fully deserving of his job. Lovie Smith, go back because Lovie was the first one here, fully deserving of his job.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what you got to be? You got to be colorblind. It's like I think we've gotten to a point. We've gotten to a point that who cares? Things have equaled out. Yes, there was a time when I first came into the league, it was a white league. I'd fully admit that. It's changed. There wasn't even, when I came into the league, there wasn't a black quarterback.
That's right.
Okay, now roughly half the quarterbacks are.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember as a kid watching the game of football. I remember just a handful. And Chicago had one, and Vince Evans, who played with the Bears and then the Raiders for a few years before going to the World Football League, I think it was called back then. But yeah, I got a question for you that I got a couple here. AW says, you have talked about Poles sticking around. Does he need to be extended to match up with the new head coach? Interesting question.
Well, it's an interesting question, and I'm going to answer it this way. Who the hell knows when his contract's up? People are guessing. That has never been put out. Who the hell knows if he hasn't already been extended?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very true.
What happens with the coaching stuff is the agents put stuff out.
Uh-huh.
He's been hired with a 5-year contract at X amount of dollars or something because it's it's like a feather in their cap.
Mm-hmm.
But the GM stuff, that stays a lot quieter.
Yeah. Indeed.
I remember I was talking to a good friend of mine who's an agent, and he does some front office people, some coaches, but he's primarily a player agent because there can be what's the word I want? Can't think of the word I want, but it's a conflict in interest.
Okay.
By representing players and coach. What if you're representing a coach and you got to cut the player? It's things such as that. But he was telling me this guy had John Robinson, the former GM of Tennessee, who's been interviewed for the Jets job. Whether he still has John, I don't know. But he told me the package.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, holy fuck. I mean, it was like unbelievable as compared to what GMs were making just when we were there. Like a lot more,
Wow.
and the perks that went with it. You know what? Those are standard. And what he ended up getting is now like a starting salary in the league for a GM. That's how the league has evolved. But it's that stuff though, like his contract never made it into the press, what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry's contract never got. Jerry, okay, we can go back to us. In fact, I'm sort of glad we're going in that direction, because you could say that we should have been fired in 2000 after the 2003 season.
Mm-hmm.
Because we stunk and we got rid of Dick Duran. But part of that had nothing to do with us. It was the deck of cards we were handed when we came in June of 2001. So, when Jerry was already now 3 years into the contract when he hired Lovey, 2.5 years, almost 3, when he hired Lovey. Now, I don't know for sure that Jerry got an extension then, but I'm sure that it equaled out with what Lovey had, because that was what was needed. And then they both got extensions again when we went to the Super Bowl. And that was only a couple of years later.
Okay. And we're going to talk more about that regime and general managers in general, but I want to stay on the topic now because we've gotten some questions. Let me go with this one from Mark.
Okay.
Ian Cunningham was just named as a possible replacement if Greg Ballard is let go in Indianapolis by Albert Breer. Have you heard anything?
That's been, the Ballard getting fired in Indy is like the Poles getting fired in Chicago thing. That is a fan-driven type situation.
Mm-hmm.
I know more about this than I'm going to say, put it that way.
Okay.
So I'll just leave it at that. Will he still be there on Tuesday? I would say it's a good bet that he is.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously things can change.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
But I had a nice conversation about that a couple weeks ago.
Very good. Okay. I think we're tracking. So I just want to say also, personally speaking, somebody said, why would you want to get rid of...
Let's go back to he's named as a potential replacement. Of course he is, because he's a name.
Right.
Okay, so that's the thing. Okay, who are the names? Well, because no reality is nobody knows the freaking names.
Yeah.
So you half the people who put these things up, they just come up, oh, this guy looks like a name. This guy, they don't know who the people are. They've never talked to these people. They don't know what the strong points are. They don't know what the weak points are. He's got a good reputation, so he must be good. Well, let's put his name down.
Mm-hmm.
Come on. Do you think they spend more than 10 minutes putting the list together?
Yeah, indeed. Next, I want to say, somebody accused me, Aldo, why do you want to get rid of the Rooney Rule? I didn't say that. I asked Greg a question about the Rooney Rule.
I think the Rooney Rule, there's a lot of people, it's been discussed in the media. It's not something that's new, that it's seen its day. It needs to be replaced.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me get through this thought, Greg. I don't know whether the Rooney Rule should be replaced or not. I know one thing. I am a product of DEI. When I was a kid and I got hired by the CBS station Chicago, it's because they wanted more Hispanic representation. They wanted a producer who could go into the streets of Chicago and talk to Hispanic representatives, Hispanic community leaders, and so forth. And they hired me over a white guy and whoever else applied applied for the job. So I am grateful for what DEI can do, because I probably would not have gotten that opportunity. So I'm grateful for it. And now, whether things should change now in 2024, that's way beyond my pay grade, way beyond my pay grade. So I just wanted to get that out for people who are accusing me of wanting to change things and so forth. I don't know. I'm here to ask Greg questions, because he's got almost 40 years of experience in professional football. We'll move on. Brandon has a question. Greg, if we don't get Ben or Brady and they go Vrabel or an experienced guy, do you like the Dolphins coach as OC? In my opinion, he will be one of the surprise fires. Mike McDaniel, the offensive genius he's been called, who is now the head coach with Miami, hasn't brought the team to the playoffs at all. What do you think about him?
First, let's hold that thought, because I got to answer a question that I got on Twitter.
Sounds good.
And I promised I would answer it. So let me just, I got an X. Can you do the topic on, no, that wasn't this, a second one. Can you talk about what if Ben Johnson decides to stay in Detroit and run it back if they make it to the Super Bowl? It's a good question. That would make him, if they got to the Super Bowl, that makes him even more valuable. I think this, just based on everything I hear, is that, last year that fictitious salary was put out, like $15 million or something like that. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Okay. So, and I mean, was it true that was put out? Yes. Was it reality? No. It's because, and he admit to it, I wasn't ready to be a head coach. He claimed it 2 years ago and last year. Wasn't ready. He goes, I am ready now. And so,
I love that. Yeah.
He wanted to be part of certain experiences, to have that in his background, to have lived through that. And right now, they're battling for the number one seed in the NFC. And if they get that, they obviously get, they get a bye. They got home field advantage all through the playoffs. They got a damn good chance of getting to the Super Bowl, if they play all their games at Ford Field. So I get it. But I also think that it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to be gone. Where? Who knows? I mean, Pelissero, who's a friend of mine, he said today, and I retweeted it or reposted it. I hate using that word tweet. Today when he was on Good Morning Football, that, he's tying Johnson here, because that is the obvious conclusion, being that you got a quarterback in place. There are some pretty good offensive players in place. You got to fix the offensive line. And so it gives them a good beginning. It's not like you're going to a place that doesn't have a guy. You get the quarterback, that's half the battle, right? So, yeah, it makes sense. But is that the guy the Bears are going to want? And they go back because, and that's why you have an interview process. And some guy said to me, well, this team's going to take this guy and this guy's team's going to take another guy. I go, you know how many teams are going to be without coaches in another 5 days? Probably at least 3 more, and maybe more than that.
Yeah.
Okay. So anybody who says anything now is totally guessing. As I said earlier, no permission slips have been put in because you can't. No interviews have been done, except, the Bears could very slyly interview Vrabel today, tomorrow, Friday, or whatever, now that he's free to do it. But outside of that, there's nobody you can interview. And Ron Rivera, too, you can interview.
Right.
So it becomes a situation where once you get into the interview room and there's going to be more than one, the first interview, especially with a guy, like Johnson or like Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator, or you could say the offensive coordinator in Washington or Slowick in Houston is that the only thing you can do is a maximum 3-hour introductory type interview with these guys. It used to be you could go there and do it. I think now, and I'm not 100% sure of this, that now you got to strictly Zoom because these guys are preparing for games. Okay, so you're trying to keep it, as simple as possible, and it's more so for the coach himself, not for the teams. And then when they're done playing, when they finally lose, and if it's say Detroit and they go to the Super Bowl, you're not going to make a final decision on him until February.
Right.
Okay. And the same thing with Aaron Glenn. So there's a lot to be done. And for people to think that all this stuff is already done and already decided on, it's ludicrous. I could say, you know what? That all the guy's really good. I think I'd really like to have him as part of the organization, but I need to sit down and talk to you first.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you get face to face. Then it's like, well, I don't think so.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you.
You know what I mean?
I know exactly. I'm kidding.
But that works both ways, Aldo.
Sure. Right.
You can say, no, I don't like him.
Right.
Don't forget, it's a two-way interview.
Right.
The candidate's interviewing the GM and the GM's interviewing the candidate. It works both ways.
Yes. Scottish Bear points out that Kevin O'Connor was a late hire with the Vikings. I hate to even try to attempt to pronounce the name of the general manager over there, but he really seems to know what he's doing. He's like a Harvard-educated guy. He's gone
more of an analytics guy at the Rams.
Yeah. Okay. So what a great hire the Vikings have done there. All right. So let me see. I got a couple of other questions. 3 Point is asking if Poe's contract expires next year, should it be extended now that you're hiring a head coach?
I think that goes without saying. And again, I'm going to go back to what I said a few minutes ago. None of us know when his contract is up.
Yeah.
None of us know. He could have already been extended.
Yeah.
He could be let go next Monday. But we don't know the answer. My gut feeling is, because of everything I said, is he's going to be there. Could I be wrong? Of course I could be wrong. Mm-hmm. But I think they're just doing everything backwards if that's what they're going to do. They set themselves back instead of and then you got the fact that Kevin Warren stood up in front of everybody at that press conference and said he's staying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right.
So then you can say he's a liar.
That's right. Greg, what is the case for keeping Ryan Poles as the general manager?
It's a great question. And I can't totally answer it because I'm not in the building and work with them on a day-to-day basis.
Fair.
Okay. So he's very smart. Mm-hmm. I think his plan is sound. He's made mistakes. I think he'd be the first one to tell you he's made mistakes. But also, in fairness, there's things which are totally out of his control that he thought weren't fixed because of injuries. Mm-hmm. And you could look the offensive line. And I keep using Buffalo, but they're such a good example. They have now lost through 2 seasons. We got 1 game to go in this season. 1 game has been lost by a starter on the offensive line over 2 seasons. 1 freaking game. That's it. Bears had 5 just last week. 4 just last week. I mean, they've had a different starting lineup almost every week this year along the offensive line. And it's the toughest position to have that happen to because of the cohesiveness that you need, because it's the only unit on a team where 5 actors won, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But, and so, and can some of it be on coaching? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you got to say that, but let's be fair. There's going to be a new coaching staff here. And so there's going to be a new coach, whoever is the head coach. be it Johnson, be it Vrabel, whoever. That's one of his key. Whoever he hires, as let's say Johnson takes a job.
Mhm.
His two most important hires are the offensive line coach and the defensive coordinator. If it's Vrabel, it's the offensive coordinator and the offensive line coach.
Right.
It depends, what the background is of the coach. You know what I read just yesterday, what was interesting, that for the last few weeks, Vrabel as a consultant has been the de facto offensive line coach for the Cleveland Browns.
Mm-hmm.
Vrabel, the defensive specialist, has been the de facto offensive line coach.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Lots of good questions here. Somebody said, let's not talk politics. Daryl had a question, and I don't know why Daryl. There are a couple of people in the chat room. Like, for instance, Daryl is kind of going there. Aldo asked Greg, did he complain when there were no black quarterbacks or GMs or centers? If no, why not? I don't know if that's even worthy of our discussion here. This is in the past. We want to talk about the current Chicago Bears football. And Daryl, I understand the sensitivity of that, but we can't change anything that happened in the past. And I'm not speaking for Greg. I'm just saying we're not going to entertain that question unless you want to, Greg.
No, the only thing is I've always been a firm believer that you get hired, fired, promoted on merit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Jerry Reese is a very good friend of mine. And, when Jerry got hired by the Giants, it was my job to train him and bring him along, which I did. And Jerry grew to be a general manager. I was proud of that. Jerry happens to be an African-American. So what? That makes no difference. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that he did a good job. He won 2 freaking Super Bowls for that team.
Yes,
okay, and then things went south. That's the unfortunate part of the business, is that you're only as good as yesterday. I mean,
absolutely.
Right now, a perfect example is Ryan Poles.
Yes.
August and September, King Poles. Everybody's praising him.
That's right.
Now he's dipshit Poles. Everybody wants to say, no, it doesn't work that way. He's the same person.
Yes, he is. Is it fair to say that what has transpired this season and has crystallized or magnified the mistakes that he's made?
Yeah,
in building the team.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
and what happens is, because he's made some mistakes, the machine gunners are going to make it loud and clear.
Right.
But you know what you do? It's reality is when you're in a front office at the NFL, you seldom read the papers, you don't listen to sports talk radio, and you don't go through an X account.
Mm-hmm.
You don't care what they say. It's somebody to me today said, well, they should care what the fans think. Well, they do care what the fans think. But I said to the guy, but if you do what the fans think, you know what the old saying is.
Mm-hmm.
Do what they want, and you'll be sitting with them. And there's a lot of truth to that.
I love that saying. Take a seat up in section 108, row 3. Let's see. I got a B minus is wondering, do you think anyone from this current staff will be considered for a job with the new administration? He thinks maybe Hightower.
I can't even answer that. Generally speaking, there's always 1 or 2 holdovers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
It depends. And which brings up an interesting point, because I know, to get back to Ben Johnson, is, remember we talked about how Ben Johnson was a holdover?
Yeah.
Okay. But what I didn't know until I was doing some research on Johnson is Johnson and the head coach worked together in Miami for like 3 years.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So there already was a connection.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, and that's a big part. Do you think that like I remember stories being told about Lovie Smith wanting to replace Ron Rivera with somebody that he knew really well and felt a little bit threatened by Ron Rivera. Did you ever hear any of those stories?
Of course.
You want to share anything about it?
No.
Okay.
I'm going to say there's some fact to it, but that's all I'll say.
All
You
right.
know, Ron was. Well, let's back up to when Ron got hired, because I think the world of Ron. Number one,
Mhm.
really a good person. Is Lovey's choice to be the coordinator? Remember, we talked about this the other day, how the rules have changed.
Mhm.
Was Marinelli. And so we put in the permission slip for Marinelli, and then and Tampa Bay said no. Tampa Bay couldn't do that now because the rules have changed. Rod was the defensive line coach, and if you're getting a chance to be a defensive coordinator, they automatically have to let you interview because it's a better job. Okay. Then, and that's why, like I said, I think it was Monday we talked about this, or last week rather, we talked about it, is because or one of the reasons there are so many more titles involved in the coaching fraternity, because technically it becomes a better job.
Right.
I want to interview you to be the passing game coordinator. Well, there's really only one offensive coordinator, but we might have a run game coordinator and a pass game coordinator and all this stuff, because it's a way to get really good quality coaches. Okay. And the other team can't say no.
Yeah.
And it also gives the guy more money because he's got a better title.
Do you think there are too many coaches on a coaching staff now? Then, cautious.
Hey, when I came into the league with Parcells, no, I'm not lying. My wife just got home. That's why the dog's barking. So I'm going to shut this door here just a second.
You go for it, and I'll read a couple comments here. Let's see. Sudsy, I got you. I'm going to ask Greg who the best offensive line candidate is. Mark wants to know, what factor is Warren going to play? I don't think anybody knows that right now. He has said in his press conference that he is going to work shoulder to shoulder with Ryan Poles. And so that brings up questions about who's really in charge. And I'm sure that Greg doesn't have answers to that, but it is a worrisome thing for a candidate. Which one of you guys am I reporting to? Which one of you guys am I supporting? Go ahead, Greg. You were in the middle of a thought, I believe.
Yeah, but I don't, how old I am. I don't remember what the hell the thought. What was I talking about?
Same here. It'll come to us. I do want you to address the question of do you think could be Kevin Warren's role in this hiring process? And does that create a problem for potential head coach candidates? Because they're saying, who am I reporting to here? Is that an issue perhaps?
Okay, let's go back to the day Kevin Warren was hired. Okay, and what did George say? George, when Ted was leaving, George said both the head coach and the head coach report to the general manager, and the general manager report to me. Mm-hmm. And that is still the case now. The head coach reports to Ryan Poles. Ryan Poles reports to Kevin Warren. Kevin Warren reports to George McCaskey. Okay, so, but contractually, and I keep bringing this up because is in the general manager's contract, he's contractually allowed to hire the head coach.
Right.
In writing. So if you don't let him do that, you are voiding the contract in a way. Is Kevin going to be involved in the interview process? I would say yes. He has every right to be. He's president of the franchise. Will he be fully involved in that? If you have a 6-hour interview, he's going to be sitting in there for 6 hours. I would say probably not, but I can't say that for sure.
I hope not.
But can use another example. We'd bring players in, on the 30 visit. They'd spend a half hour with me and they go across the hall and spend a half hour with Jerry.
Okay.
It's, Kevin's going to be part of the process. He's going to have his input.
Mm-hmm.
I like this guy. I don't like this guy for whatever reason. And when they make a final decision, he will have some input. But if you use the contracts, Ryan's going to say, I want this guy, and I want this guy because.
Right. Well, and the process perhaps has already started in terms of discussions between Poles and Warren as to the type of head coach they want for the organization, whether it's an offensive-minded head coach or whether it's a defensive-minded head coach or whether it's a disciplinarian because of the culture has changed. Isn't that fair to say that hopefully they've done a profile of the head coach?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that you'd say, okay, if all the chips fall the way we want them to fall, we're going to get an offensive coach that is a strong disciplinarian, can lead, can handle both sides of the ball, yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. But that's today before you've interviewed anybody. And then you're going to start interviewing people. And I said to somebody on X today, there's going to be surprises. And not just here, everywhere. Mm-hmm. Somebody's going to knock your socks off in the interview room.
Right.
And somebody you weren't expecting is going to knock your socks off in the interview. Okay. That could have been Flus for all I know. Okay. And that's why I got the job. But it's going to happen. That's why guys like Campbell got the head coach or, the head coaching job in Detroit. Yep. He was not a favorite to get that job. LaFleur wasn't a favorite to get the job in Green Bay. LaFleur was a one-year coordinator.
1 year. That's wild.
Under Vrabel. Okay.
Yeah, in the Vrabel, exactly. Vizzo wants to know how long do you think this process is going to last in terms of the head coaching position, given that there are so many teams, you talked about this earlier, potentially looking for head coaches. We could have as many as 7, 8 teams looking for head coaches. Does that put an urgency on Poles and Warren to make a decision on their head coach?
If it's a coach, let's just say it's Johnson or Brady or somebody like that. You can't hire them until they're done playing. And it's not inconceivable to say those two could face each other in the playoffs or, in the Super Bowl. Right? So so what day is the Super Bowl? I don't know. Was it February 8th or something like that? I don't know what the date is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the earliest you're going to see a hire then is after that. What are you looking it up?
Yep, I am. Super Bowl 2005 is
2025.
Yeah, 25, February 9th.
Okay, so I'm going to say the earliest you're going to see a head coach, if it's a guy that's in the Super Bowl, it's going to be 12th, 13th of February, something like that. Maybe a day before that, give or take. Which brings up another point. I got to bring this up because I took a thing. Sure. There's all this talk that, Weeder wrote this article and that it was totally Poles' decision. I took a screenshot of what was in that article.
Okay.
To be clear, Eberflus was never forced on Poles, at least not by anyone employed at Hallis Hall. That's the whole kicker.
Napoleon. I love it. That is wild. Right there,
that whole line. Read that one line, and like the whole thing becomes clear.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I don't know where I saw this, but it was, in my opinion, a good point. When you bring in an Ernie Arcosi and a Bill Polian to help you with your head coaching choice, doesn't that mean that you're kind of stuck in 1990s, 1980s football, and not, perhaps they should have reached out to somebody who knows the younger head coaches better than guys who have had success decades ago.
Well, you make a good point. We talked about this once before about how this whole thing came about. And I'm not just talking with the Bears.
Right.
Okay. General rule is most owners don't know a damn thing about Coach A, Coach B, or Coach C. Okay. They're billionaires who are very successful businessmen, but don't necessarily know a lot about football.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They just got enough money to own a team. There was a lot of mistakes made, and so the league, because of that, decided that we'd put like a committee together of former GMs to help teams with the process. And that's where this whole thing started. And so it's people like Ernie Accorsi, Bill Polian. Ernie is not involved anymore. I don't even know if Bill's involved anymore. It's been 3 years since, but Ernie was involved in at least 4 head coaching hires that I know of.
That's quite a bit.
Yep. Who was head coach in Detroit before Campbell?
Don Burr's in the chat. Maybe he can help us out, and I'll check it on it. A list of Lions head coaches.
And who was the general manager before the current general manager?
Yeah. Wasn't it Spielman?
No, Spielman was up in Minnesota.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Dan Cabell, Robert Prince.
His older brother is at Detroit now, is like I don't know what his title is, but he's like the assistant to the owner.
Right. Robert Prince coached 1 game. Darrell Bevel coached 4 games. And then Matt Patricia for several years, or 3 seasons.
Patricia was who was the GM for Patricia?
Let me find out here. You're asking all these tough questions.
Put it this way. Ernie was involved in that one.
Oh, my goodness. He was also Matt Millen. Was it Matt Millen?
No, Millen was way. No, but with the Patricia hire and the GM there and all that, Ernie was involved in that one.
Okay. It's coming up here. My computer is.
Ernie was involved in. God, I'm going crazy with my names now.
Before Brad Holmes, it was Bob Quinn.
Okay, that was Ernie.
Yeah.
And okay. The former GM at Atlanta who just interviewed with the Jets.
Mm-hmm.
Ernie did that one.
Okay.
He had come from Baltimore. So he was involved in a bunch of these things. Polian was involved in some. Charlie Casserly was involved for years on that committee. He no longer is. And there's other guys. I know Jerry hasn't, because Jerry probably goes, yeah, I got the guy, me.
That's hilarious. As Jeremy says, to sum it up, Ernie Arcosi hires the shit coaches.
I worked for Ernie, with Ernie and for Ernie for 4 or 5 years in New York.
Mm-hmm.
He was our assistant GM, and everybody knew George was going to eventually retire. And Ernie was brought in to learn the Giant way, because we were doing things a certain way, and that George Young had developed. And George and Ernie were really tight. They're both Baltimore guys, originally. And so Ernie came in to assist him and then got elevated. At that time you could just elevate a guy. You didn't have to go through the search process like you have to now.
Gotcha.
So, but I like Ernie. Ernie is not an evaluator. Ernie by trade was a writer.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And
I didn't know that.
he started off, I don't know if he started off there, but he was like the SID at Penn State and things like that. And then he worked, that's what he originally did. And then I don't know exactly how he got involved in personnel and stuff, but then all of a sudden he was the GM in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. What a rise. What a rise. Okay, I do have this graphic here that is going to, because there's already been discussion about who's the worst general manager in Bears history.
I know the best is for the last 50 years, 40 years.
And who would that be, Greg?
Jerry Angelo.
Your former boss, Jerry Angelo, was 95 and 81 for a 540 winning percentage. The GM, or actually he was the de facto GM because the Bears didn't really have a GM at the time, was Mark Hatley, and he had a 297 winning percentage. After Angelo,
I got to bring up because Mark, God rest his soul, is really a good guy.
I've heard a lot of great stories about him.
Mark wanted out of Chicago.
Oh, really?
Yes, and a lot of it was to do with the media here. Who's the guy that was, he just got fired, but the loudmouth guy out of Dallas.
Skip Bayless.
Skip Bayless used to be here.
That's right, at the Tribune.
And Skip Bayless and Mark Hatley used to butt heads all the time. And it got personal, and Mark wanted out. And then Mark went up to Green Bay, did a hell of a job up there. He's a good guy. And then all of a sudden, at training camp, I think he had a heart attack. And
wow.
Just a really good guy. So we came in June of 2001. Mark was here for the draft of 2001. And then he left right after, and we came in 6 weeks later, 7 weeks later, something like that. I think my first day was June 14th. Jerry might have been hired June 12th, something like that. But I knew beforehand if Jerry got the job, because I had just had knee surgery, and I'm sitting on the couch at home, and it comes over on ESPN that Jerry Angelo's going to be the general manager. I'm limp, get up, and I go, well, I guess I'm moving to Chicago. And I literally had knee surgery that day.
Wow, that's amazing. Jeez. A few more questions I want you to get to. Sudsy has asked, who do you think is the best offensive line coach that's out there?
I can't answer that right now because who's available?
Yeah, that's the thing. We don't know, right?
He's not going to come out of retirement, but the best one is my guy, Harry Heastan. But Harry's retired, and Harry's still a young guy. I mean, age-wise, Harry can coach if he wants.
Yeah. But he's like 67, but has no interest in coming back to work, is what I've heard.
He is. He's enjoying retirement. He lives out west. I think he's in Colorado.
Still getting paid, I think.
No, I don't think he's getting paid by anybody anymore. But he's involved with the Joe Moore Award that I think Army won this year because he's the guy who presented it. And the Joe Moore Award, it goes to the best offensive line in college football each year, and Army won it this year. So he's still really involved, but I think involved only to the point of where he wants to be involved.
Gotcha. Yeah, I can appreciate that. Brandon wants to know, Greg, do you think the offensive and defensive coordinators learn a lot from their head coaches and can bring a lot with them for their new job? Yeah, I think everybody learns from their boss, right?
Yeah, but you also got your own identity. You know,
Right.
I learned this a long time ago, and I tell you, is be you. And you know, we talked about it once before. When Belichick went to Cleveland, he tried too hard to be Bill Parcells. You know, he was with us. He was with Parcells for a long time in New York.
Right.
And then he goes to Cleveland, but he tried to be a Parcells type. It didn't work. He had to be Bill Belichick. He had to create Bill Belichick. And he did. By the time where did he go back to work after he got fired in Cleveland? With Parcells.
Yeah. Samo asked, does Greg still think that Flores won't get another head coaching job? His name has come up a lot, even with the lawsuit. Could a team hire him?
Yeah, no. Will he get an interview? Yeah. Will he get hired? No.
He apparently has some connection with Kevin Warren and Ryan
They're
Post.
teammates at Boston College.
Okay. So, so how serious is this lawsuit? Do you think he would drop it?
It's well, put it this way: if you're going to do background and research, you better call the GM, Chris Gaines in Miami, and get the whole story. You know, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. So help me God, because there's a lot of shit that went on there.
Yeah.
And there's, you know, some of this is secondhand stuff, but just say micromanager, head coach that wouldn't let coaches do what they're supposed to do, and that is coach their position. You know, and problems getting along with the general manager, and almost to the fact of bullying the general manager and stuff. And so, you know, he is a great defensive coordinator.
Very creative.
Yes. Give him one side of the ball. He does a great job. Give him a whole team. Now, will he learn? Could he learn from that? Yeah. It's only been a few years now. Okay. And he's still got, you know, this isn't a little lawsuit. This is a big lawsuit. Yeah. And it has to do with racial discrimination, a lot of stuff, you know, and they can't go to court over it because they're still arguing if it's supposed to be under league rules. A dispute like that goes to arbitration, and the arbitrator is the commissioner or somebody appointed by the commissioner. Yeah. And they want it, their side wants it in a court of law, which is against NFL bylaws. And so you're fighting over that. And so you can't even settle that, let alone the suit. So it's got a long way to go. And the same with Gruden. Gruden's got a lawsuit going.
There's talk he might go to the college game now.
I think if he was going to the college game, he would have already gone. Any coaches, you know, they would have been hired already. College, you know, for the most part, except for the bowl games, the college season's been over for a month.
Right. I think Bill Belichick has kind of opened the door for former NFL head coaches who can't get.
He's been hired almost 3 weeks.
Has been 3 weeks, yes.
Okay,
indeed.
So that's what I mean. That door's already shut. Everybody who wanted it, unless a playoff team all of a sudden loses their coach, that door's been shut.
Yeah. Got a question here from Oliver Chapman. He says, my question is, how will upper management change the mindset in the locker room? I'm not sure that's their responsibility. Yeah.
That's not their job. That's the coach's job.
Yeah. Can they do anything other than hire the right leader?
The player personnel people, management, the general manager, pretty much stays out of the locker room.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll even put it this way: the coach stays out of the locker room.
So it's only after games where you see Poles and Eberflus around.
Before and after, yeah. You don't. I mean, that's the player's sanctuary.
Yeah. Charles has a good response to that.
The coaches got their own locker room.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Charles has a good response for that. The best thing they can do is stay out of the way. Yeah, exactly. That's
no, but the what you're getting at, and I know what you're getting at, and is the people. It's who you want to bring into the locker room, meaning the players, obviously, and you want strong. We had a great locker room. Okay, so you get people like Olin Kreutz, Ruben Brown, Roberto Garza, Agunlier, Peppers, Brian Urlacher. I mean, these are all highly respected players. And not only Jerry Azuma, not only were they highly respected players, but they were very good players. Okay, like early in his career, when we first got here, Brian was not a vocal leader. He was, you can have a vocal leader or an example leader. Brian was more of an example leader. He led by just the way he did things, the way he took care of himself, his work habits, the way he practiced, the way he worked out in the weight room, all of that. The vocal leaders were guys like Olin, okay, Agunlier, and they, Mike Brown. Mike Brown was to the defense when he was here what Olin was to the offense.
Was he that tough, or because my understanding of Mike
he
is that he was
wasn't
just really
grass,
smart.
he was too little. But,
Yeah, all right.
excuse me. But yeah, I mean, he was that strong vocal presence in the locker room, and players. If you goofed off, I mean, like if you goofed off in practice and you weren't practicing hard, those guys would let you know about it. They police themselves.
That's what I want. That's what I want. As opposed to what Cole Kmet said. He shared with the media that maybe players aren't doing this. Maybe that was so dumb for him to say, to basically accuse.
You know what? And I didn't, because I'm not listening to that stuff anymore. I don't want to, especially given the circumstances. There's too much bad stuff going on.
Yeah.
He needs to say that in the locker room to the players.
Yep.
He's a freaking captain.
Yep.
And the one thing I hope this new coach doesn't have is a so-called leadership council. They got a freaking million captains. No, you don't. You have a couple. 2 on offense, 2 on defense.
Right.
And a special teams guy. That's it.
It just invites.
You got so many guys, friction. You don't have a guy.
Yeah. Exactly. Just need 3 guys, 1 on offense, 1 on defense, 1 on special teams. That's it. No more. Got a good question here from Victor De Jesus. He says, has Greg ever been involved with a team where a new head coach came in and affected all aspects of the building, not just the actual players on the field, a culture changer type of head coach?
I mean, I've been in the building with a bunch of new coaches. Now, Parcells quit in May, and we elevated one of the coaches, and we had no choice. It was frickin' May. So we throw that one out. And that was Ray Hanley. And he should have been fired after the first year, but George waited 2 years. Okay. Then we had Dan Reeves. And Dan Reeves was an authoritarian. Dan came from Denver. And at the time when he was at Denver, there was more coaches that had total control.
Mm-hmm.
and Dan had total control. And one of the things he had to show in the interview was that he could work without having, George was the boss. He wasn't the boss. And could he work within that? Oh, yeah, I could do that, because he wanted to be a head coach again.
Right.
And he was that way for a year. And then Dan Reeves came out. The real Dan Reeves came out. It was a freaking nightmare. It just took all the fun out.
That's too bad.
But then, after that, we brought in Jim Fossil, and he had been there once before as an assistant, so he knew, how we did things. But I don't think he was a difference maker or anything like that. He was a good football coach. We got to the Super Bowl with him. The best coach I've been around working with is Parcells, and that's why he's in the Hall of Fame. And he ran the football team. I mean, from the coaching standpoint, and you didn't mess with him. Lovey was the leader, but in his own way. Lovey was, like I say, he's a silent assassin. Don't mess with Lovey.
Did he have a small circle of confidants around him?
What do you mean by that?
What I mean is, did he confide in his coordinators, certain people on the staff, and they kind of ruled? It was like they would go into a room together and then decisions were made, or did he make decisions? Was he kind of a lone wolf thinker and then ask his coordinators and coaches to implement?
Good question. I don't know if I can answer that. He was heavily involved with the defense because he's a defensive guy, and we were running his defense, and Ron had to learn that defense, but Ron still ran it like his way. So I think they played off each other. They worked really well together in that aspect. He gave the offense pretty much to the OC. Now, the original offensive coordinator he had was Shea was his name, and he turned out, Lovey had this really strong relationship with Martz, and Shea was was pushed by Martz, and so he brings in and he just wasn't very good. He very smart, but not a good play caller. Just didn't deal well with people. And I just remember you say the silent assassin. This is the day after the season ends, right? Mm-hmm. And he's only been there 1 year. Walks in, and I can't remember his first name, Shay's first name, but he walks in and he says, 31st in offense. Think we're making a change, and walked out the door.
Terry O'Shea?
Terry, that's right. Terry Shea. And that was it.
I think he's credited for bringing that bubble screen, wide receiver bubble screen to the NFL. He ran that a lot with Chicago.
And then we brought in Ron Turner. Okay. Ron did a good job.
Yes, he did.
And Ron brought in Harry.
Mm-hmm. That was a good coaching staff. A lot of people starting to ask, let me get these out of the way first. Warthog wants to know if you are still a Giants fan.
Yeah, I worked there 17 years.
Yeah.
But they would be, I'd put them like third.
Bills second and Bears first, huh?
Yeah, I'm always going to be a Bills fan. Always going to be Bears fan. Did you see the picture I posted of my girls at the game the other day?
Yeah, nice. I shared it with my wife.
So then I said, "You got your playoff?" I sent her a text after, "You got your playoff tickets?" She goes, "Yeah." So they're hoping that they win one, they have two at home, and they're the number 2 seed. So Kansas City would have to lose for them to get 3 at home. if they keep winning. But I think there's at least 2 more games they're going to be going to.
Do they cheer exclusively for the Bills, or do they have a little bit of room in their hearts for the Chicago Bears?
Oh yeah, no, they're Bears fans.
Yeah.
They went to their fair. I mean, Ryan lived here for 15 months, her senior year in high school, and then went back to Buffalo for college. And she went to her fair share of games. Kelsey, whenever she visited, went. They went to the Super Bowl. They went to the Super Bowl in New York too. I mean,
Awesome.
Kelsey,
Bring him on the show one day.
Kelsey is a huge Robbie Gold fan, going way back.
Wow, that would be cool.
And Robbie knew it, so there would be, she would like die if she's. I mean, Robbie Gold to her was like Garth Brooks to her. It was like, oh my God,
That's fantastic.
It's funny, but and Robbie knew it really well, so he'd play into it.
Yeah. The BT123A asks, how quickly can you tell if a coach is the right guy or not, or is it something that takes a while to realize?
Well, I hope you know before you make the hire.
You better have a strong conviction at least. But there are times, right?
I'm going to say this because I've been involved in some of these interviews and even, it's like scouts that I hired. And you sit down and you talk with them. And after a while, you just know.
Mm-hmm.
You
Sure.
just that feeling. And I'll give you a perfect example. And I've never said this publicly. I hired 2 scouts within 10 days of getting the job here. Chris Ballard, Teddy Monago. And I talked to each one 4 times on the phone. Never met him until after I brought him into the building and hired him.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
I just knew on the phone. And I must have spent 6 hours with each one of them on the phone. Total.
That's the way it should be.
Just going back and forth because I knew, it's the first time I'm doing it. And then, I got him to get it right. So I'm taking a chance now. I haven't seen him in person.
All right.
And I hit a home run with both.
That is awesome. That is great. So anything in those interviews, just to take you back there, those 6-hour interviews with those 2 scouting prospects, any one particular question that you asked that you said, holy cow, that question really pierced and revealed something about this guy that I either like, or in your case, you liked it, or could have led to, I don't like this guy. You remember anything like that? Because I'm always interested in the process of questioning, asking questions.
One thing I remember was that, and I did this with anybody I interviewed for a scouting job, and you're not as much on the road now as you were back then, just because of the way technology is and stuff now. Mm-hmm. But you spend a long time on the road, and it's hard on a family, very hard, especially when you got kids. My way of interviewing was try to talk them out of it.
Oh, interesting. Because
you
it's a
really
tough job.
Want to do this, and I'll just hammer in the bad part.
That's a good idea.
And then make them sell me on why.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
So it was, and that's what I did. And Chris is still this way to this day. Chris is very yes or no, sir.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk to him, yes, sir, no. And he was that way. This was 23 years ago, and he's that way right now.
I love the way he is with the media, which is basically fuck you.
Well, you know what? He's got a vacation down there in Indy compared to Chicago. You don't, and it's the same in Buffalo. It's you got one newspaper in Indy, you got one newspaper in Buffalo. You don't have. It's not like it is here, where it's crazy. And in most cases, the media is on your side. They want you to do really well, and they're fans. And you, because it's a smaller town, it's you got better relationship with the people. Does that make sense? What I'm saying? It's just because I've been in New York, Chicago, Philly, because I've been. It's so much different. Well, I can say this place is by far the hardest. And I've been to Philly and New York.
Yeah. Greg, in the coming weeks, you and I will be talking about the player prospects, but we got a couple of questions now if you want to entertain them. Will Campbell, Sudsy asked, the prospect Will Campbell, have you done some research on his strengths and weaknesses?
Well, there's a question to be answered. He's a very good player. No question. And the problem is, what's he going to be in the league? A guard or a tackle? And the problem is his arm length. Okay. And right now he's sitting with an arm length of supposedly 33 inches on a guy that's like 6'6". I could look up, I could tell you exactly. I don't know if I don't have the arm length from the spring, but I got the heights and weights.
Cool. Let's see if I got a couple comments here. Alligator arms. I just got to scroll down to LSU because I got literally every freaking school in the country here. Yeah, and just let me say that B minor says a guard. That's not, but that's what we need is a guard. I would say I agree with B minor that the higher priority right now is fixing the interior of the offensive line.
Bear with me, I'm almost there.
Okay, Samo says Will Campbell can nearly reach his pocket standing straight up.
I got better terms than that, but I won't use it.
I got my favorite term.
Okay, he was 6'5 3/4", 319 in the spring.
6'9",
6056, which is 6'5 3/4", and 319. That doesn't have his arm length, but I got his arm length. It was an even 33. 33 on a guy this much under 6'6" is it's okay, but it's short, especially when you could compare him to, he's the same height as Braxton Jones, and his arms are 2.5 inches shorter.
Wow.
Okay, his arms are 3 inches shorter than Amagaji. At that position, it's being able to leverage players, and you need length. Now, in saying all that, spring arm lengths sometimes are useless because you got a very inexperienced scout. The guys who do it are the combine scouts. It's the low man. The combine scouts are usually the young scout on team scouting staff, and so the teams send him to the combine to learn. So he does those guys, and he's very inexperienced.
Okay.
So he's doing it, and how accurate is he doing the arm length? I've said it a million times. That is the most difficult. It sounds like it's simple. It should be simple. Everybody screws it up. Yep. And I mean, we've had variances of over an inch on one player in arm length. And how can they have that? But it's because they don't do it right. So he could very well have 34-inch arms or something like that. Okay, well, if you get up into that area now it's a different ballgame. Okay, so we're not going to know for sure. And he might go to the Senior Bowl, and I'm going to tell you what, they screwed up there too. Because and so we'll find out for sure at Indy. Because they're the same guy does it. It's done precisely. It's done to certain specifications, and you can trust that it's correct. And so sometime in the end of April, we'll find out what his arm length. And the guy is similar, but it's not arm length, it's height, is Banks, the left tackle at Texas.
Calvin
Really
Banks.
good player. He's an underclassman, so he still has to declare and say he's coming out. He's listed as 6'4". Okay, is he 6'4.5", or is he 6'3.5"? You know, because those program things aren't always accurate.
Yeah,
and so again, it's going to be Indy before we find out. Because if he comes in at 6'3.6", he ain't playing tackle. He's playing guard. I already said there's one tackle in the league under 6'4", and that's Dawkins for Buffalo. And he's 6'3.7", and he's got 35-inch arms.
Kay makes an interesting point when he says 6'4" is good for Caleb. Given that Caleb is about 6'1", one of the shorter quarterbacks in the NFC North, let's just say, do you think it's better if your offensive linemen are not 6'6" and towering, or it doesn't matter with Caleb because of his strength in the moving around in the pocket?
I've never seen. I mean, he gets a couple balls batted down, but so I've seen 6'5" quarterbacks get balls batted down.
Absolutely.
I've never seen an issue. I know when I did college tape on him, you look at it, that was the last thing you thought about. You know, there are shorter quarterbacks in the league. There's some guys, you know, Phil Simms was 6'2.5". Phil Simms' delivery point was right about here.
Oh my goodness.
He might as well have been 5'11". You know, he wasn't coming over like this. Go, just, you know, put on some throws and watch Phil Simms. He's throwing the ball right in here.
Gosh, I hated Phil Simms. I still do.
Well, I didn't. He got a Super Bowl ring.
I love it. Olin Cruz.
You don't like him on TV, right? Or
yeah, exactly.
Like
It's his TV work, really. Olin says that Drew Brees said he liked big guys on the offensive line. So
Drew Brees is barely 6 feet.
Yeah, he's short, right? Yeah. Greg, who is your top 3 coaches for the Bears?
Well, we didn't get into it today, and we've been.
Do you want to tackle it next Monday?
Yeah. I got a list here, just some basic background that I put up, just so it's easy to talk about it. Basically, they're a half-assed resume, Cliff Notes resume.
Yeah. Right. Well, we will be back here next Monday. It is the Monday that is typically referred to as Black Monday. And
if we could know if Ryan Poles is no longer, we could very well know that.
Right.
By the time we do that.
Absolutely. I would expect that if they are going to make a move with Poles, that they'll probably tell him on Sunday night. Don't you think? If that were to happen? Well, maybe not. The way they handled it.
It's a road game. No, it'd be Monday morning. But I'm going back to say, if they were going to do it, they would have already done it.
Yeah.
I mean,
a couple more questions.
Logical.
Couple more questions I want to make sure to get in. Jacko asked about Joe Brady and Ben Johnson. Do you have a preference?
Well, when they went head-to-head, I thought Brady bested Ben Johnson a couple weeks ago in that particularly, but that means nothing. When you look at the resume, the guy who's more experienced is Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson's 38 and Brady's 35. Okay, Ben Johnson's been in the league since 2011. Okay, and Brady's got like 3 years in the league.
Yeah, you want more experience, definitely.
And he's 4 years in the league. He went from, and this was interesting because his fame came from that LSU national championship where he ran the passing game for LSU and Joe Burrow was the quarterback, if you remember. And he was the real hot name there. He wasn't even the coordinator. He was the passing game coordinator, but he was also the play caller, and so he got a lot of fame then. And he goes to the next year. Rule gets the head coaching job at Carolina, and Rule, was only there a couple of years. Rule hires him as the OC. Now, I did not know this until 2 days ago, and a guy told me this. There was a big personality conflict between Rule and Brady. Okay, I got to check into it more, but I did not know that. I know that there was a disconnect, but the thing didn't work out. But Rule as a head coach in Carolina didn't work out, so he was let go after 2 years. Went to Buffalo as the quarterback coach. And Dorsey was the coordinator. Dorsey was the quarterback coach under Daboll, and when Daboll went to the Giants, Dorsey got elevated to the offensive coordinator. Well, a year. So Dorsey's the coordinator 1 year. Then the next year, which was 23, things were going south. Brady's the quarterback coach. They fire Dorsey. Brady gets elevated to the, mid-season gets elevated to the OC position, and the offense takes off.
It really did. Yes.
Okay. So, and what they've done this year. I mean, I think they've only had 2 games where they've been under 30 points or something. They had like 9 games in a row where they scored more than 30 points.
Jacko says Dorsey sucks in Cleveland. Everybody sucks in Cleveland.
So my only question, he's an innovative play caller. And what's even remarkable is Buffalo's done a complete reset on their wide receiver core from last year to this year. Their 2 top receivers from last year are history.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Ford and Diggs.
Yeah.
So they've done a reset with that, and yet Josh is still having a Josh Allen year. He didn't miss a beat.
His best season as a pro, in my opinion.
I don't think it is yardage wise, but when you look at the whole big picture,
right?
And it's like Brady has a lot to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
And he uses the run game a lot. Both of them do. Ben Johnson uses the run game a lot.
Absolutely. I love the way both of those guys call games.
They can take apart a defense, both of them. Mm-hmm. My only question on Brady is he just too young and not ready because of the experience? And again, that's why you go through interviews.
Absolutely.
You try to find that out. I don't know him. How the hell am I supposed to? I'm just saying. Yeah, but he's pretty young. But okay, but I don't know anything about him.
Exactly.
Except, people in Buffalo would hate to lose him.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to give Samo the last question for Greg. Will polls in the scouting staff's job to identify players change with this new coaching staff? I mean, wouldn't we need players that fit new schemes on offense and defense? Yes.
Yeah, we talked about that last week too, because there'll be. Now, it depends on what they're looking for. I mean, who's going to be running the offense, who's going to be running the defense. But yeah, the player profile for each position will change. In some cases, maybe very minimally or not at all. In other cases, it could be huge. How they look at offensive linemen right now in this particular scheme. They want really athletic offensive linemen because they got to get out in space and play. Mm-hmm. That may change. Maybe the athleticism becomes less of an important factor, and they want more elephants in there. Mm-hmm. If you look at it, if it's Ben Johnson, and you look at their line. I mean, I don't know exactly what they do, but they got a pretty athletic offensive line.
Yeah. All right, I got to squeeze one more in there. Mr. Englewood says, can you ask Greg, what's the difference was between Vontae Davis when he retired at halftime. This was several years ago. And Devondre Campbell was when he basically left the field during a game and said he would not play because he was benched once an injured player returned. Was any one of those more or less?
I wasn't there for. I wasn't with either team when it happened, so I don't know the whole story.
Yeah.
You only know what's reported.
Right. But I would think, Greg, that under no circumstances was that acceptable by either Davis or Campbell. Both of them made huge mistakes.
Totally agree with you on that part.
Yeah.
Hey, it's the same thing with Brown, the receiver. He walked off the field. Remember, he stripped down in the end zone?
Oh, yeah. Boy, I remember all of the Twitter nonsense that was going on. People coming after you because you said Brown is somebody you don't draft, and people were like, "Well, he's done this, he's done that, he's done that."
Yeah, guess who got the last laugh? Thank you very much.
He sure did.
Some guy from Deadspin, wrote an article, and he had since got let go, but most of the staff at Deadspin, I sent him a thing. I go, "You want to retract that now?"
Yeah, I should have, right?
I did. I sent it to him on his Twitter thing.
But did he? He didn't retract it, though.
Right. I go, yeah.
Yeah. Hey,
who was right, asshole?
People want to know, what do you think about? Do you think the Bears will upset the Packers? It doesn't seem like the Packers need to start any of their starters and will instead rest them.
Are they locked into a position?
Yes, they are locked in.
What are they? I mean, I know they're in the playoffs. Are they locked into a seed?
I'm pretty sure. Let me see. I think I got the document here. Yes, they are locked into the 7th seed.
7th, the last seed?
Yeah, according to. Let me refresh this because I had this.
No, I think they got a. There's still a chance a couple teams getting in. I think in the NFC.
Well, the Falcons have a chance to get in because they're at 8. So
they might be locked in at 6.
They are locked in to make the playoffs.
Right. That's a given.
Let me
I don't know if they're locked. If they're locked in, if they want to be a certain seed, then they might not want to rest people.
Yeah. Well, it seems to me, if I'm reading this correctly, this is from ESPN. They say the current NFC playoff picture, they got the Lions, with the 65% chance of earning the number 1 seed, and the Vikings to 34th. That's the big Sunday night matchup. And then they've got the Packers down here at 7th, 100% making the playoffs, win the division 0%, earn the number 1 seed 0%. But they've got the Falcons at number 8 with 15% chance of making the playoffs. So I guess it's between the Falcons and the Buccaneers. Yeah, that would make sense.
It's on the I think it's on the division or something.
The division title, correct.
And so, you might be right. If they're locked in at 7,
right,
then not gonna make a difference.
Yeah. So I think that they'll probably rest people. So my question is, do the Bears have a chance of beating the second string Packers?
Let's use Buffalo. Everybody says, well, they shouldn't play Josh Allen. Josh Allen says, I'm playing.
Yeah.
You know why? He's got like a streak of 120 games going. I am starting the game. Now, he might only play 2 plays, but he is starting the game.
What about Barkley? Do you think
more to him than anything?
Do you think Barkley should go for the record on Sunday for the Eagles?
Yeah. How often do you get a chance to break it?
I agree with you. I agree. You want to be careful, of course, but I would say you have to break the record.
Who the Eagles playing?
Who are the Eagles playing? Anybody know? Let's see.
Somebody in the AFC or NFC East, because everybody's playing a division opponent this week.
Giants are at Philadelphia.
He'll break. Well, but the Giants beat the Colts, but it's in Philly, right?
Yes, it's in Philly.
Game over. You might get it in the first quarter.
I love it. I love it. Well, we will be here Monday, so-called Black Monday. Greg, Gabriel, great show. It was all over the place, but we got so much great information out, and I really, really enjoyed. One of my favorite episodes was today, but maybe my favorite episode will be next week because there will be changes coming, and maybe we'll know what they are next show on Monday. Greg, any final words?
Thomas Brown will get interviewed. That's a given.
Yeah. And I think he deserves an interview. At the very least, it's fact-finding, right?
Right, but he got put into a difficult situation, and he will be given an interview.
Yeah,
I think he was told that right from the start.
Right. He deserves it, and if anything, for Ryan Poles, he might learn more about himself from what Brown will share with him. You know what I'm saying? It's like he has nothing to lose. Brown does if he tells Poles, I think this is where you made mistakes, that could have helped the team and so forth. That's what I would use that interview for.
In fairness, he's only been the head coach for 5 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, 4.5 weeks.
Right.
What does he really know about everything that went on before?
Probably very little.
Okay, because a lot of times it's the head coach might share that the why, but a lot of times
Poles will know that there were extenuating circumstances.
Yeah, I mean the why is something that the head coach would know, meaning Flus, but not necessarily the assistant coaches.
Yep, indeed. Well, enjoy the concert, Greg. Happy New Year.
Concert. He's playing at a restaurant.
Oh, wow.
He plays. It's a piano bar. He's the piano man.
Oh, I love it.
He played at our wedding.
Are you going to have a drink?
Probably one. I haven't had a drink in, I bet you, 6 weeks.
Jeez, I haven't had a drink.
Unless you call a half a glass of wine a drink. I had a half a glass of wine on Christmas night.
Well, I don't
like to drink anymore. I really don't. It just doesn't do anything for me.
Well, you and I are not alike in that. You're the best, though. I'll tell you that. Happy New Year to everyone who's watching live and those on.
Happy New Year. Everybody enjoy tonight. Be careful. Don't do anything stupid. And next week begins a whole new season for us.
Exactly. We'll see you in 2025. Goodbye, everybody.
See you later.
My love for you, I could never